All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. If you're on the call this morning for quarterly goal setting, thank you for being on. Today, we're going to run through some updates on contracts. So we just got a note this morning. If you log into Marist, you will probably see it as well. But we just got a note this morning that we are the July 1st. Good morning, Kathy. Thanks for being on. The July 1st deadline for these new contracts to roll out has been postponed. So the new contract date is now July 23rd. So if you log into Marist, you're going to see that. We're going to post it on Facebook, right after this message, or right after this call, I should say. But yeah, the new update is now no longer July 1st. It's July 23rd. So just keep that in mind. Don't, on Monday, if you don't see new documents uploading into your online forms, .loop, DocuSign, don't panic. The deadline has been pushed. And if you'll drop something across the bottom of the screen, that would be great. But the new contract forms are going to roll out July 23rd, no longer July 1st. So we've gained a couple of weeks there before new docs roll out. So just keep that in mind. Wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Let's dive in though. So again, if you have questions, drop them in the comments. July 23rd, Leo, is the new contract date. So July 23rd. Again, if you have questions though, drop them in the comments. I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go away here so everybody can see, and we are going to get started. So let's start off with the first document that we have, which is our listing contract. This listing contract looks a little bit different. So it looks different from our initial contract. There's a lot of similarities and there's some differences. So let's run through it. So again, owner, right? Name, all the same, municipality, or the address, the owner, all of that stuff is the same. County, numbered, known as, address, legal description if you have it, so on and so forth. Hereby appoints, line 8, that is where your name is going, appoints you as their herein referred to as broker, as sole and exclusive agent with the exclusive right to market, sell, or exchange this property upon the below terms and conditions. So top of this, very self-explanatory in my opinion. Line 14, the contract begins on the effective date and ends at 11:59 of that is your expiration date. So whatever date you put there, that is your expiration date. Same exact similar look to the previous listed agreement. You have an expiration date. Effective date is considered the date everyone signs the contract. And then it also says the effective date shall be the date of final acceptance. Therefore, as indicated by the date adjacent to the signature of the last party to sign this contract, or if you wanted to have some other effective date, you would type it in there. But I would just go with the effective date as being the date everyone signs the documents. That's the executed agreement. That is your effective date. Line 19, listing price. Put the price in there, self-explanatory. Let's get into compensation now. So a couple of notes here. They threw in line 21 and 22 and 23. The amount of compensation is not set by law. Compensation is set by each broker and is negotiable, subject to individual broker policy. Now, I've heard some brokerages that have you have to get permission if you take less than a 6% fee. I know there's some brokers that frown upon you discounting. We do not have anything like that set in place. We feel it is your business. You list properties at whatever fee you feel comfortable with. I would encourage you to show value to get 6% because I feel you're worth it. I know agents can get 7%, sometimes 8%. But again, this is your business. You operate it the way you would like. So from a broker compensation perspective, you negotiate whatever you would want there. But for the conversation of this contract, excuse me, I've been talking all morning, so there's water. 29, this is where the total commission will go. So if I set out to get a 6% listing agreement, I would put 6% on line 29. So line 29 is going to have 6%. And Leo, make sure you monitor for Facebook comments as well. I know you are, but yeah, thank you. 6% would go on line 29. Line 32 then. So line 32 through line 40 is where you will put what you're paying out. So if you're going to pay out to, let's just say for conversation's sake, broker compensation, investment my service to list your property is 6%. Out of that 6%, I'm going to be paying 2.7 of that to any buyer agent or any agent that brings a buyer to the property. This is exactly the same as, well, I'm saying the verbiage is the same as the previous listing agreement that you all have been using for many, many years. It's just in a different place. Whereas before, remember, kind of went, the commissions weren't stacked, it went across. So you would put 2.7 on buyer's agent. If you wanted to also pay out a transaction agent, if someone came to you, say unrepresented, but they were utilizing a transaction agent, would you still pay that agent? Most likely. You could put 2.7. Sub-agent, you can put 2.7 there, or just put 0, whatever you want. We don't really see sub-agency a whole lot any longer. So that's up to you whether you fill that in or just put 0. But again, 29 is where your total commission is going, not your cut, the total commission, 6%. 38, 39 is where what you're paying out to an agent that brings a buyer. So again, very similar. Now, this here, line 42, if compensation agreed upon between broker and cooperating broker is less than the amount stated herein, the difference will or will not be reduced from broker compensation. So what does that mean? And then let me finish it first. If the cooperating broker compensation agreed upon between buyer and owner is more than the amount stated, owner agrees that the terms authorized in this cooperating compensation disclosure will prevail. So we'll talk about the cooperative compensation here in a moment. But basically what this says is, let's just say we're offering, conversation's sake, 6% listing, we're offering 2.7 payout. And for some reason, the agent writes an offer, and in the offer they write that they want 2.5% to be credited toward the buyer in the form of a closing cost credit to cover commission. Well, what we're checking here by saying will or will not is, now we took it at 6, we were paying out 2.7, the agent is only asking for 2.5. What happens to that 0.2% difference? So by checking will, it means that if compensation agreed upon between broker and cooperating broker is less than the amount stated herein, the difference will be reduced from broker compensation. So if you check will, that means now you effectively took a listing at 5.8%. Because let's go from the top. We took it at 6, we paid out 2.7. For whatever reason, the agent writes an offer and asks for 2.5. There's a 0.2% difference there. So if we check will, that means we're reducing the commission to 5.8 total, with 2.5 of that being paid out. Now, if we check will not be reduced from broker compensation, what that means is that we're still getting 6%. And now instead of paying 2.7, 2.5 is getting paid out, and you're making that extra 0.2 in compensation. So check will or will not there. Owner acknowledges, right here, there's a note. Owner acknowledges, this is line 47, that the sale contract offers and commission agreement may contain terms to compensate the broker assisting the buyer, which may differ from the amounts detailed above. Owner understands provisions of this section and agrees the elections made in the section are made solely by the owner, basically just CYA, right? Line 51, unrepresented buyer. Now, we may start seeing early on some more unrepresented buyers, potentially. So with that, we need to discuss this with our client. Now, this says, line 51, in the event buyer is not represented by a broker, broker compensation shall remain the same as the amount listed under broker compensation, or shall be modified as follows by a percent. What is that saying? That's saying if somebody comes to us unrepresented and we're not acting as a dual agent, they're just representing themselves. They say, you know what, I've got a lawyer. They're going to write the contract for me. They are completely unrepresented. We have the option now we could reduce our fee from 6% to 3%, or 3.3%. Or we could say, no, if someone comes unrepresented, my goal is to sell your house, and that's what you're compensating or hiring for, is to sell your home. So if someone does come unrepresented, the fee, the investment in my service remains 6%. So you have two options there. You can either remain the same, it's 6%, whether someone's represented or unrepresented, If they bring an agent and we're going to pay out 2.7, if they come unrepresented, I'm still getting 6%. This is your choice then to either check it will remain the same, or you could check the box modifying if somebody comes unrepresented. Again, there was just a lot of clarity in this new agreement that really wasn't in the previous agreement. So that's what the unrepresented buyer means. Additional compensation. If we do have agents that charge a fee, a transaction fee or additional compensation fee on top of the 6%. So if you're an agent that would charge 6%, and then let's just say you want the Network Global 485 fee covered as well, and not to come out of your 6%, you would write that in line 55. Owner agrees to pay broker additional compensation of $485. This additional compensation shall or shall not be credited against any other compensation owed by owner to broker and shall be due and payable to broker. And then we're going to check a date. So if it's not, if you want this in addition to your 6%, you would check shall not be credited against any other compensation owed by owner. It's a separate fee. And then also, let's say you wanted this up front for some reason, you would check the box that this 485 fee is due the effective date of the listing contract, regardless of whether or not a ready, willing, able buyer is procured, and which shall be deemed to earn upon receipt. So that is stating that if you wanted to charge an upfront fee and get the money up front, you would check line 58. Now, if you wanted to just get the extra fee paid at closing, which is the more normal thing, you would check only if and on the same date that the other compensation above provided for is payable. This is the very similar, almost the same verbiage that was in the previous listing agreement as well. So additional compensation has always been there. This is nothing new. It's just in a little bit of a different area. So again, keep in mind with that. Then look here, 62. The compensation amounts shall be determined by the total purchase price or exchange price without reduction for any other changes. Owner agrees that such compensation shall be paid if the property is sold, exchanged, or otherwise transferred by owner within X amount of date following the term of this contract or any extensions thereof. This is the protection period. So let's just say your listing agreement expires. If you wrote in, it's 0 if nothing left in, but you could write in a 30-day protection period, basically saying that if a buyer that had looked at the property while you had it listed came back after the term expired within that 30-day protection period or whatever protection period you list, if they come back, you could still be owed commission. Now, it does say, though, that they can enter into a bona fide listing agreement with another agent, and the owner pays the broker compensation on that transaction. So they could list the property. Your contract expires. So it does not mean that if you write in a 30-day protection period, it does not mean, and your agreement expires, it doesn't mean that they can't list with somebody else. They still can list with somebody else. But if a buyer came back that looked at your property while you had it listed and now wanted to make an offer, or the agent came back and said, hey, we showed this a month ago, we see it's expired, but we want to make an offer, you could be entitled to commission. So protection period is nothing new either. That has always been there in the previous agreement. Now, dual agent. Let's look at dual agency. So this is disclosed now in the listing agreement. Dual agency. Does owner consent to broker acting as a dual agent? Yes or no? Not applicable is not an option for us because we do allow dual agency. So yes or no? Now, what would you say to a seller here? I just want to let you know, I want to talk about this. We may have buyers come directly to me, potentially, to want me to submit an offer. Now, will you allow me to represent both you and the buyer as a dual agent? Yeah, I guess. I mean, what does that mean? Well, essentially, you're hiring me to sell your property, and it's possible that I could also potentially find a buyer for your home as well. And if at that point I would be representing you and the buyer as a dual agent and have a fiduciary responsibility to both. But that way, what would also could be a benefit to this, though, is that essentially I would make sure, because I'm working with both you and the buyer, that I facilitate as smooth of a transaction as possible to make sure we make it to the closing table. I don't foresee many people having an issue with dual agency. Now, if you get the box checked here, again, we've had dual agency forever. And what I would often say too is that you don't dual agent. Everybody on this call In the last 100 transactions you've done, how many have you been a dual agent on? It probably hasn't been a ton, would be my guess, maybe 1 or 2. But it has to be disclosed. Now, keep in mind as well, if you act as a dual agent on your sale contract, you make sure you don't mark designated agent. You have to mark dual agent. It's something that gets missed a lot by agents. That is your disclosure, because you have to have in writing to your client you're operating as a dual agent. Step 1 is getting the seller to acknowledge and consent that they would permit you to be a dual agent on the listing agreement. And then when you do write an offer, if you are acting as a dual agent, make sure you check dual agency on that contract. Designated agency, this is all the same. Your name goes here. You're being authorized as to act as a designated agent. Your name goes there. If you have a partner or somebody you work with, you would put their name on lines 94 and 95, same way as the other listing agreement. Keep going. 97, 102, all the same. Home warranty is the same. Offer, don't offer, consider it a later date. Disclosure authorizations, a little bit different. 114, offers. Owner does or does not permit broker to to disclose the existence of offers on the property. I would recommend that you get this checked yes. You would want to disclose if someone calls and you have 3 offers and they say, do we have any offers on the property? If they check no, they don't want to disclose, well, you can't say anything. And then you can't potentially get a 4th offer or a 5th offer or drive the price up. So I would encourage your clients to say, yes, look, by authorizing me to disclose the existence of other offers on the property, we could in fact get into a bidding war, generating potentially more money and get you top dollar potentially. So it makes sense for us to check yes. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah, absolutely it does. Terms. Owner does or does not permit broker to disclose terms of offers on property, provided, however, the broker is permitted to disclose such terms as may be required by the MLS, applicable or by law, essentially. So there are some things that by law, like a defect. Let's say there's about a foundation issue and the seller's like, no, I don't want you to disclose that. By law, you have to disclose that. So there are things by law, but I would also encourage your client to say, yeah, let's discuss, be able to disclose certain terms of the property potentially, or offers on the property. So it doesn't mean we have to tell the other people everything, but if we have a little bit more flexibility and freedom in what we can say, we could potentially, again, drive the price up. So again, getting them to check yes might be a good thing for that. Broker role, the same. It talks about property access and key box system. So basically talking about a lockbox. Of course, they're going to want to check yes on this so you can put a lockbox on the property so we don't have to go back to 1980 where you have to go to the real estate office and pick up a key. So anybody on the call licensed back then? It was a touch before my time, actually. You had to go to the offices and actually pick up a key to go show the property. So think about how slow that would take. If you had to show 3 or 4 properties, you're going to 3 or 4 different listing offices to pick up keys, and then you have to go return them. A lot of time spent. Anyway, of course, you would want to check yes to access the lockbox. So make sure this gets checked. A lot of this I'm going through just to make sure and you're aware of where these check boxes are. Special agreements, same. A lot of this information is the same. We do have another section though, line 194, photographs and internet advertising. Owner, of course, you would want them, does agree that broker may photograph or otherwise electronically capture images of exterior, interior photo. Basically, yes, allow us to take photos. 97% of home buyers start their search online. That's our first showing. We want to make sure your property shows as best as it possibly can online. So I would encourage you to allow me to get photographs taken by a professional photographer so we can showcase your property online to then get as many potential buyers to come see your house as possible. So there we go. Photographs, very important. Surveillance and recording information. There's just nothing to sign here or initial or box to check, but it does talk about notice to owner regarding the recordings within the property. Owner has been advised to remove any items of personal nature, and owner does not want to be photographed, recorded, or transmitted, including but not limited to family photos, paperwork, or other personal identifiable information. Owner hereby releases and indemnifies broker and employees from any liability which may result from any recording or transmitting in the property. So basically just saying, like, we're not liable if, I don't know, somebody sees a personal photo in the photo, something of that nature. Also talks about smart technology. Keep in mind cameras, things like that. Keep in mind with cameras, everybody, like if you have a client, you're showing property and you're like, don't sit in the kitchen and talk about the offer that you're going to put together, because chances are so many people have cameras in their houses now, and they're just listening to everything you're saying. I used the example about 10 years ago or so. I had a client, this was before cameras were super, like now a lot of people have cameras, at least Ring doorbells, but this was back before all of that. But I had a client who had cameras all over his house. And he literally was like texting me when people were at his house looking at it. And he lived out of state. He already moved out of the house. It was vacant. But he was texting me saying, hey, they're going to offer $650,000, this, that. Like he was hearing every conversation they had and all the offer terms they were talking about, how much they loved the house. And so just make sure if you want to talk, your clients want to talk about making an offer, I would suggest leaving the house. Don't even stand by the front door because there could be Ring cameras. People could be listening. So just be aware of that. So there we go for that. A lot of this other information is exactly the same as the previous agreement. Your clients are going to, again, initial every page. They're going to sign your information. Let's see. You put the broker Network Global as a company. Authorized agent signature is you. So line 322, Network Global, you sign your name on line 3, was that 2025? Your email is the authorized agent email. You print Mike's name, printed broker name, and then broker signs. So 331, broker will sign. And then, but your information is going on the right-hand side. Question from Sabrina. Will the new forms be uploaded in our .loop? Yes, it's supposed to be, but now it will not take place until July 23rd. So it was supposed to happen Monday. So everybody, if you don't see forms update on Monday, don't worry. We got the note today. When you log into Maris today as well, you're going to see an update, and they emailed us early this morning. The new forms, this change for these documents is not taking place July 1st. It's now taking place July 23rd. So we got that scrolling across the bottom of the video as well. So don't worry. On Monday, if you log in, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have the new forms. Continue to use the old forms. So you keep using the old forms. We're not going to worry about any changes now until the 23rd. So cool. Okay. So you're going to sign on the right side. Broker signs on the left. Same thing. It's a 8-page listing agreement. They sign page 6, which I don't know why they did this, but I'm not in charge of creating documents. But then 7 and 8, again, it's all the same verbiage from the previous listing agreement. So they're going to sign page 6, 7, and 8 is just extra docs. Make sure they initial though. Very important that they initial. Questions on the listing contract before we move on? Any questions? All right, if you haven't, I'm going to keep moving. If you do, drop them in the comments. Let's talk about buyer. Actually, you know what? Before I go into buyer agency agreement, let's go into the cooperation agreement, and then we'll come back to this because I feel like some of this stuff makes a little more sense. Okay. Let me scroll. Give me a minute. Okay. This is a new form that is a brand new form that's been rolled out, Form 2108. It's called a cooperative compensation disclosure. So what this cooperative compensation disclosure is basically setting the amount of compensation that's being paid out. Now, keep in mind, in addition to our new forms that are rolling out, really the only other change because of all of these lawsuits, and what I would say is the most substantial change, is that effective in August now, the commission paid out on properties to buyer's agents is going to be removed. So I'm just going to say that again. So that's the biggest change that's taking place, is that we will no longer be able to log into the MLS come like middle of August and look at a property and say, oh, they're paying out 2.7 or paying out 2.5 or they're paying out 3%. Well, we're no longer going to be able to see that. So what I encourage all of you to do when you go on a listing appointment is bring your listing agreement with you and also bring this cooperative compensation disclosure. Now, this is going to be a very important document, in my opinion, because it's going to state what's being paid out to the buyer's agent. So let's talk through it. So cooperative compensation disclosure, note the amount of compensation is not set by law. Compensation is set by each broker individually and is negotiable, subject to individual broker policy. So again, just a little note there, saying, hey, it's negotiable. All right, people can't say, no, I didn't know it was negotiable, which we all know it's negotiable, and we've all negotiated listings, and we've all reduced our commissions, and we've all done that, right? So the lawsuit was kind of crazy, but anyway, water under the bridge. So it is negotiable. Line 1 and 2 say that. Line 3, property address. Line 4, by and between undersigned buyers and sellers. This is a document that will get signed by buyers and sellers, and I encourage all of you to get this signed at your listing agreement. Line 5, the listing broker is offering to pay cooperating compensation on this transaction to the selling broker, which selling broker is buying broker, buying agent, equal to, and that's where you would put your commission that's being paid out. So on your listing agreement, again, for example's sake, if we said 6% and we're going to pay out 2.7, we write that in our listing agreement that we just went through. And then we come to this document and we write it in again, basically. We write in what the payout is. Listing broker is offering to pay cooperating compensation on this transaction to the selling broker, which selling broker is buyer's agent, equal to 2.7% of the total sale price or lease, or you can put a flat fee. In addition, a bonus of, and that's where if you're going to pay out an agent bonus, is offered to selling broker, which again is buyer's agent, by seller or listing broker. This compensation shall be due and payable. So if they also wanted to add a bonus as well, that would go there. So you're going to take this document on your listing appointments. You're going to get the listing agreement signed. The investment in my service is 6%. Out of that 6%, I'm going to pay out 2.7% to any realtor that brings a buyer. How does that sound? Fantastic. Great. Let's sign our listing agreement. Here's another document, again, just stating what we just signed, that of the 6% investment in my service, we're going to pay out 2.7 of that to any realtor that brings a buyer. Sounds good. It's as simple as that. Right now, commission objection is a little bit different, but it could be that simple. We'll talk through some objections in that at a later time, though. But so that's where you're going to put that there. And then there's your listing broker, Network Global, your signature, your printed name, and then your sellers are going to sign. Now what you're going to do is you have this document that you could send to agents when they show your property. Now, what is going to be the best use of this document? Well, I don't have a clear answer on that yet, because keep in mind that this document is showing what is being paid out to a buyer's agent, which is the missing link right now because it's no longer accessible in the MLS. And what we've been told is that we most likely will not be able to upload this as a supplement, like a seller's disclosure, in the MLS. This document cannot be in the MLS. And then it said some other verbiage about like it or other affiliated or similar type, like it can't be on your website. We're trying to get a clear answer on that, because early on, a couple of weeks ago, I was like, well, what would be cool is if we get this document, we go on a listing, we get it at 6%, we're paying out 2.7. What if we were able to send this document out via showing time? When somebody schedules a showing, what if we sent this out via showing time? All right, and then they know it's getting paid out. I don't know if that's going to be possible or not yet. We don't have a clear answer yet, but that would be really cool. But what you could probably do is email it to every agent that's showing the property. So, and Kathy, but why? I don't understand that question. So maybe clarity on that if possible, Kathy, on why we can't display it in the MLS any longer. I'll wait for you to respond on that. Not sure on that. But if that is your question, but why? That was the ruling, and that was the agreement with the settlement. So, okay, yeah. So the reason it's no longer going to be displayed in the MLS is when NAR settled with the lawyers in this class action lawsuit. Basically, their settlement amount, which was like hundreds of millions, in addition to that settlement amount, they agreed that compensation would be removed from the MLS. Why, Kathy? I have no idea. I mean, honestly, it doesn't make any sense. Like, to me, it makes absolutely no sense. Why now we're going to have more confusion around what's being paid out on a property? We have to go through extra steps to figure out what the payout is, rather than just having it displayed on the MLS. I don't know why. To be totally honest, it seems ridiculous. But that's what we're faced with right now, is that in the settlement agreement, it was that it can no longer be published. So what is the reason that the fee is not able? Yeah, what is the reason that fee or percent is not able to be published in other places? That's what's still the gray area, because it will apparently be able to be potentially published in other areas. We just don't have clarity on what that means yet. Could we publish it on our website, on our company websites, or could we, email this out, or can we put this document in showing time and send it out? We do not have a clear answer on that, and to be honest, I don't think anybody does yet, and I think that's why the agencies like SLAR, like the board and the MREC and the people in charge, basically, I think that's why they're still scrambling. And that's why we just saw our forms get pushed from July 1st now to July 23rd. They're not ready, right? This happened pretty abrupt, and they've been scrambling. They're doing a good job of putting things together, but no one has 100% clarity yet. Could we answer if another agent calls us? Yes, absolutely. If somebody calls ahead of time and says, and Kathy just said, listing agents are going to have more phone calls. Yep, unfortunately. I think especially in the beginning. So yes, if somebody calls you to answer your question, Anne-Marie, and says, what are you paying out? Yeah, we're paying 2.7. Let me email this cooperative compensation disclosure over. That is totally fine, totally legal, nothing wrong with that. I do think until we get like a standard practice in place, which could take time, it could take 6 months, it could take longer. Kathy, you're absolutely right. We're going to have a lot more phone calls. So you're going to get text, emails, more phone calls. What's the payout? Are you paying anything out? Right? So perfect world, we could drop this in showing time as some sort of a supplement that gets emailed out when somebody schedules a showing. I don't know if that's going to be possible or not. We don't have a clear answer on that yet. So you can't, what I do recommend though is get this document signed. And again, keep in mind, this is not happening now until July 23rd. These documents won't be available now until July 23rd. And then the commission will remain in the MLS until August, till like mid-August 15th, 18th. I can't remember the exact date. I'll figure that out. So we have time. So it's not like this is happening Monday now. We have time. So it's going to remain in the MLS. And my hope is between now and July 23rd, which is a few weeks away, we're going to have some more answers. And then between July 23rd and August, when the commission comes out of the MLS, we should have more answers as well. So we don't have the perfect answer or 100% clarity yet, but my anticipation is over the next 30 days or so, we should know a lot more, and we'll make sure to keep everybody updated on that. But I just want to keep everybody aware of what the changes are in the new form. So I feel this cooperative compensation disclosure is going to become a very important document. So read through it. It's self-explanatory for the most part, but it doesn't hurt to just read through it to completely understand it. But it's just, again, showing what you're paying out. And this could be sent maybe in the form of an email for right now, or maybe we figure out a way to where it can be sent from showing time. So questions on the compensation, drop them in the comments. And then let's go back to the buyer agency agreement. All right, so buyer agency agreement. Here we go. So our buyer's exclusive agency contract. Again, some differences here. So buyer's name hereby appoints to you. Your name goes on line 4, herein referred as broker. So your name is on line 4 to act as buyer's exclusive limited agent for the purposes of identifying, negotiating, or acquiring real property as described below. Broker shall refer to the brokerage and any affiliated licensee. The term to acquire or acquisition shall include the purchase, lease, exchange, or option of real estate. Type of property sought. This is new. Type of property sought as identified by its use shall be residential, investment, commercial, lots, acreage, and farm. Any additional specifications for the property sought are as follows. So keep in mind this. With buyer agency, this is an important thing to know. With buyer agency, if you're getting a buyer agency signed for a client looking at, say, a personal home for residential, and they check residential, then you are representing them for residential property. But keep in mind, let's skip down here just a moment to line 18. Buyer is or is not a party to other buyer's representation agreements. If the buyer is a party to other representation agreements, those agreements shall not be for the same type of property listed under the type of property sought. What does that mean? That means that a buyer could potentially have as many as 5 different buyer agencies signed with 5 different realtors. They could have a buyer agency agreement signed with you for residential. They could have a buyer agency signed with another agent for investment property. They could have a buyer agency signed with another commercial realtor for commercial. They could look with another realtor for lots and another realtor for acreage and farm. Keep in mind, lots are 10 acres or less. Acreage and farms is beyond 10 acres. So a buyer could have 5 different buyer agency agreements signed with 5 different realtors, and that is completely legal. So what you'll want to ask is, when you're getting this signed, I understand based on our phone call, you're looking to purchase residential property, a single family home for yourself. In addition to buying a single family, is there anything else you're in the market to purchase right now? Investment properties, commercial, lots, acreage, anything of that nature? No, that's it. Okay, fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and mark residential. And then we're going to ask them, are you currently in an agency agreement with any other realtor? Yeah, I am actually. I've got a business. I'm looking for a commercial. I've got a commercial agent already. Okay, fantastic. We're going to check the box. Is a party on line 18 to the other buyer's representation agreement? So just keep that in mind. Very important. Now, any additional specifications, line 10, are as follows. This is where, because what's going to happen now is the buyer agency is required. They're stating that the buyer agency is a required document prior to showing any homes. So we've all done it. We've all got a sign caller from somebody. We've been out and showed a property with no representation signed, no buyer agency agreement signed. We've shown the property. We've all done it. We're all guilty of it. Most of us, I would assume. So that can't happen anymore. So now what's going to happen is we're supposed to have this document signed prior to showing property. So let's just say I get a sign call on my listing or on any listing. Somebody calls off a sign or an internet ad, and they say, hey, I saw the property at 123 Main Street. I want to take a look at it. It's fantastic. It's a great property. I'd love to show you that property. Out of curiosity, are you currently working with an agent? No, I'm not. Okay, fantastic. If you liked the property and wanted to submit an offer, would you allow me to represent you? That's always the follow-up question to ask, because that's where the truth's going to come out. They're going to say, well, technically, my mom's my realtor, but she's really busy, so I just want to waste your time. My realtor's super busy, so I'm sure you don't have anything to do, so let me just waste your time showing it. But that's where the truth comes out. So you're going to ask first, would love to show you that property. I can get it set up and scheduled today. Out of curiosity, are you working with an agent? No, we're not. Fantastic. If you like this property and wanted to make an offer, would you allow me to represent you? That's where the truth generally comes out. So definitely make sure you answer that or ask that follow-up question, because the first one, they're always going to say, no, I don't have a realtor. When you ask that follow-up, that's where the truth comes out. And then what you're going to say is, that's fantastic that you would allow me to represent you. Now, in order by law for me to show you this property, I need to get an agency agreement signed. So what I would like to do is I'm going to send you over a document right now that you can sign from your cell phone or computer electronically. And all it's going to state is that I'm going to be showing you this property and working with you potentially on this property should you decide to make an offer. So what you would do is you would type residential, and then you could write in the line 11, 10 and 11 for additional specifications for property sought are as follows. You could write it specifically for the listing you're going to show. That way, they don't feel like they have to sign this agency agreement with you, where they're stuck working with you on somebody they don't even know that they've just made a phone call with. It's for that specific property. So that would be my recommendation for getting an agreement signed with somebody you don't know. Somebody that calls off your listing or calls off an internet ad, or you pay for Zillow leads or realtor.com or whatever the case may be. Get it signed specifically for this property. So that's how I would handle that scenario. Now, if I was doing a full-blown buyer, and then what I would do then is go meet that person in person. And this has always been my rule of thumb when I was actively selling, I would give one free showing. I would go show the property one time. I would ensure by asking my 2 questions that they don't have a realtor. I would go show the property, and then I'm going to find out more about their situation. I'm going to build rapport. I'm face-to-face with them now. They can start to build trust. They put a face with a name. They start to see the value I bring to the table. Then I would be setting up a time for us to get together to do a buyer consultation and get a full-blown buyer agency signed. So that's something you can do, is just sign it for one particular property, go show it, meet the person in face-to-face, and then do a buyer consultation and get the official document signed for all residential property. So keep that in mind there. Term, that's where you put your expiration date. Line 22, again, if you have questions, drop them in the comments. We'll make sure we answer. Your effective date, if you're signing this for a 3-month agreement, 6-month agreement, 12-month agreement, whatever you like, would go there. Again, you have the protection period. So what is the protection period? Similar to the listing. If you were to say go show a buyer a property and then this agreement expires and then they decide to go put an offer on the property without you, you could potentially be entitled to compensation as procuring cause. So same thing as the previous buyer agency agreement, the protection period is the exact same. Now, compensation for services. Let's look at the amount. Again, disclosure, line 36 and 37. The amount of compensation is not set by law. Compensation is set by each broker individually and is negotiable, subject to individual broker policy. Again, this is your business. You decide what you want to be compensated. So, broker compensation. If during the agency contract, buyer enters into a contract to acquire any type of real estate described above, which is the box you're checking, residential, commercial, lots, whatever it may be, whether through broker, buyer, or any other broker or person during the term, broker shall be due and payable at closing. Check 1. This is your fee. So this is exactly the same as your previous buyer agency agreement. You type in 2.7% or 3% or 2.5 or whatever you charge. And then again here, look at 45. Buyer agrees that compensation above is voluntary and knowing choice of buyer. So my conversation would be something like this. The investment in my services to work with me, having gone through and I've just shown you everything I'm going to do to find properties on your behalf. Now the investment in the service to work with me is 3% of the sale price. Now in most cases, many sellers are going to continue to offer compensation, and the listing broker will be offering compensation to cover my 3% fee. Now, in the event they're not offering compensation, then what we can do is take a look at that and decide if we want to choose to continue to look at the property. We could pass on the property, or we could potentially write my fee into the contract as well. So that's a quick way, and we're going to do more scripting around this, but that's how we can start to explain this. It's exactly, keep in mind, this is exactly the same as you've all been doing it since you've got in the industry. Nothing has changed here. The only thing that's changed is we don't know the amount that's being paid out. Now, in most cases, many sellers are going to continue to pay out the way they always have because they want agents to bring buyers to the property. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to pay 0 out, and all of a sudden you've just lost a huge pool of realtors who have tons of buyers that could be bringing buyers to your property to drive more showings, to drive potentially more money. So keep in mind, broker compensation goes right there. Line 47 is additional compensation, same as the listing agreement. If you charge a fee on top of your 3%, then you would write that in here. If you charge a $485 fee or a $299 fee or a $250 fee or a $199 fee, whatever it is, you would check that box. And then the same thing, line 50 and 51, identical to the other. Effective date, meaning if you charge that fee and wanted it paid up front, you would check the box effective date, which means it's due and payable as soon as they sign. Or the other one is it's paid at closing. So exactly the same as our previous agreement. Now, also talks about dual agent. Does buyer consent to broker acting as a dual agent? Yes, no, not applicable is not an option for us because, again, we allow dual agency. I would encourage yes. Listen, if as a dual agent, it basically means I'm representing you. I could also, though, if I had a listing and I list a property and I showed it to you and you decided to make an offer, would you be okay with me representing the seller and you at the same time as a dual agent? Yeah, sure, no problem. Great, mark yes. So I would encourage you to encourage your clients to say, yeah, dual agent, not a problem. Designated agency. Now, keep in mind, I have scripts that we're going to practice to kind of counter what I just said. So it's going to contradict myself. We're not going to do that today, but it can help in certain situations. But for the most part, getting them to say, yeah, operate as a dual agent is a good thing. Designated agency, 85, your name goes there. If you have a partner or somebody you're working with, their names could go on 88 and 89. Special agreements, none if left blank. Same thing, you can write certain things in if you wanted to, same as the original agreement. Initial, make sure they're initialing every page. This information is all very much the same. They are going to sign. They sign here at 193, their information. authorized agent signature. Again, broker company 211, network global. Go to the right-hand side. That is your signature. That is your name as authorized agent printed name. That is your name as authorized agent. And then Mike's name goes at broker and broker signature. You send it to compliance at network global for signature. And that's it on the buyer agency agreement. Again, I take that back. Four out of 6 pages. It's a 6-page document now. The other 2 pages are here. So just make sure they're initialing. It's the same verbiage from the previous agreement. Make sure they're initialing those pages as well. All right. Questions on that? If you have questions, drop them in. Let's go to our last thing here, which is the residential sale contract. So residential sale contract. At the top, nothing has changed. Everything is the same as the contract you've always seen. We get into purchase price. That section is what's changing. So this looks a little bit more similar to the Missouri forms if you've ever used it. Purchase price, $500,000. Make up an example. $500,000 is the total purchase price to be paid as follows. This is where, remember on page 2 where our closing cost was? That is no longer there. So the closing cost section is no longer in the finance section. It is now right at the top, which I think might be a better place for it anyway, to be honest. Closing cost, a dollar amount or a percentage. 3%, for example's sake, 500K purchase price. 3% of purchase price shall be credited by seller at closing toward buyer's closing costs, prepaids, points, and other fees allowed by lender. So if your buyer wanted closing costs, you can write it in there. Or on line 36, 3% of purchase price shall be paid by seller at closing toward buyer broker's compensation. This is in addition, this is an important line here. This is in addition to any amount agreed upon in the separate cooperative compensation disclosure form. So let's say the agent sends you a cooperative compensation disclosure form, 2108, which we went through just about 10 minutes ago. If they send you that and say, yeah, we're paying out 2.7%, and you say, fantastic, your buyer will sign that document. You want your buyer to sign that document stating what the payout is. And so now the seller has stated what the payout is. The buyer knows what you're getting paid. There's clarity, right? And that's what this whole thing was about, was clarity. Now, if you wrote in the contract now 3%, that means on line 36, you write in 3% of the purchase price to be paid by seller at closing toward buyer broker's compensation. That means now you're asking for 5.7% commission because they've already agreed to pay out 2.7, and now you're asking for an additional 3%. So keep that in mind, that if there is a clear or cooperative compensation disclosure form, writing the commission in is not necessary. Let me see here. I saw a listing that stated buyer to pay $1,000 to the community. Is there some place to put this into the contract? Yeah, you would write that most likely, Emery, in the special terms. I've seen that as well too. Sometimes like on foreclosures or people in short sale, especially if they're behind on HOA, things like that, there's like a capital contribution fee to the HOA. So that would most likely go in the special terms, stating that your buyer is going to pay that. I would put that in special terms or special agreements at toward the end of the contract. Okay, so purchase price. So keep that in mind. If there is a cooperative compensation disclosure, your clients are going to sign it, your buyers are going to sign it, the sellers would have already signed it. You do not need to write compensation in. Now, if there is no cooperative compensation disclosure, and let's say you call the agent, you say, hey, I'm just curious, is there a payout? Are you paying anything out to a buyer's agent? I'm planning on showing your property. No, my seller wants to pay 0. Okay, well, I would go back to my client then and say, look, when we met last week and we talked about, all the things I do for you and finding a property and helping you get into the goal, help you with the goal of getting into your new home. I mentioned that in most cases, sellers may potentially will be offering compensation to cover my 3% fee on the document that we sign. In this particular instance, this seller is not paying anything out in the form of compensation. So we have a couple of options. One, we could pass on it and go and look for other homes. Or two, we could, if you decided you liked the property and wanted to make an offer, we can write in that fee to be covered by seller in the contract. So that's where, again, negotiation. My advice would be, yeah, let's go find properties where it's already being paid out, because there still will be a lot of them. And I think too, when sellers in the beginning, there will be sellers that aren't paying anything out. It's like, I don't have to pay this anymore. And there are going to be agents that aren't strong enough to explain it. And so in those instances, we may see zero payouts. But what I also think is that a lot of people are going to forego looking at properties and say, no, let's just move on to the next one, because I don't want to roll in an additional 3% into my loan, or if I can't get, potentially the seller to cover this or that. So I think we'll see, again, I think it's going to be a little chaotic in the beginning, but give it 4 to 6 months and we're going to start to see a normal set of standards and practices amongst agents and how everyone operates. So keep in mind too, for a seller that doesn't want to pay out commission when they have to go buy a home, they're going to be in the same exact potential boat where maybe there's agents not, or sellers not paying out. So a lot of it's common sense. And with conversations I've had with clients and sellers and people, a lot of it is just how we explain it. If we explain it, a lot of people have common sense. We will have a small percentage of people that are like, I'm not paying anything. That's going to happen. But overall, the majority are going to see the benefit in offering compensation to an agent to be able to then bring more buyers into their home, which then drives the price and gets them a better, higher sale price. So back to our contract here, this is where we're writing in. So let's just say your client wanted 2% for closing cost credit. You would write that there. And if there was no compensation disclosure for him, you would write your 2.7 or 3% on line 36. So you could do that as well. You could ask for 2% or 3%, depending on what the guideline is of, depending on what the lender will allow. So talking with your lender as well is important. Is there a place we can get a copy of these? Yeah, we posted them in the Facebook group the other day. We'll have Leo post them again though today, and make sure you have access to all of these. Keep in mind, we can't, again, it says right here, not for use before 7/1/24, so don't use these yet. And now that 7/1 is 7/23. So again, we're not going to be using them for a few weeks, about a month, but yeah, just to have them to review them. We'll post it up again to make sure you have access to them. But yeah, so closing cost and then your fee as well. I do believe, though, again, the cooperative compensation disclosure is going to be very important. I recommend getting that signed on every listing. Earnest money stays the same. Additional earnest money, nothing changing there. Financing the same, with the exception of closing costs getting moved up to page 1 now. Closing, possession, all of that is the same. They did add in a rider, the cooperative compensation disclosure. So what you want to do is, if you're showing a property, in the beginning here in August, you're going to call the agent and say, out of curiosity, do you have a cooperative compensation disclosure? Hopefully the agent says, yes, I do. Let me send that over to you. You get it. It shows it's paying 2.7 or whatever it is. You're happy with it. You decide to make an offer. You get your buyer to sign that agreement. You check the box stating that that agreement is part of this contract. That's going to be very important. This is just like an appraisal rider or a contingency, or any rider has to be made part of the contract by checking the box. So make sure line 104 there, they've added that in. Make sure that gets checked, and now it's being made part of this contract. So very important. Franchise, title, survey, all the same. Couple of tiny little tweaks here, like moving a paragraph, nothing catastrophic there, and or applicable terms in this contract, again, minor. Inspections, all the same. Insurability, irrigation. Big one here, guys, that a lot of people miss while we're just talking contracts. Irrigation, backflow certificate. Ask your client, when you go on a listing appointment, do you have a sprinkler system? And if so, do you have a backflow certificate? In our sale contract, because this gets forgotten a lot, it says right here, if the property has a lawn irrigation system attached to the public water system, seller must provide to buyer documentation dated within 12 months prior to closing from a certified backflow inspector indicating that the proper backflow prevention device is installed and functioning properly. This gets missed a lot by agents. So make sure, I would ask that 100% of the time on the appointment. I would get the agreement signed as they're filling out seller's disclosures. Out of curiosity, do you have a sprinkler system? Fantastic. Do you have a backflow certificate dated within the last 12 months? I'm going to need that on file. So anytime, whenever we get an offer, we're going to have to share it with the buyer. So happens a lot, or it gets forgotten, or it comes up late in the closing process when we're getting ready to close. Now the seller's scrambling to find it, or they have to get their irrigation company out there to do one. So just has nothing to do with the new changes in the contract. I just saw that and thought I would bring it to everyone's attention on the call because this one does get missed a lot. So make sure it's in the contract. If they have a sprinkler system, make sure you get it done. So I would always ask. Remedies, loss, signability, nothing else changes here. Final access, walkthrough, square footage, seller's disclosure. The only thing's changing here now, again, this is where if you were operating as a dual agent, you would check dual and dual. If not, you're normally a designated agent. We work through designated agency through our brokerage. So make sure on that. But then here, sources of compensation to brokers, including commissions and or fees. The seller box will be no more. There's going to be buyer and seller with, if applicable, cooperative compensation disclosure. So check that box. If cooperating compensation is being offered, seller and buyer agree to pay the compensation to the listing broker and buyer broker in such form and amounts as authorized in attached cooperative compensation disclosure. Seller and buyer agree that listing broker and buying broker are third-party beneficiaries under this contract. Again, a lot of this, what's changed is just more disclosure. People can't say, I didn't know what you got paid. I didn't realize you sold my house. You know, you helped me buy a house and you got $9 grand or whatever. But anyway, more clarity. So this is changing here, minor tweak. So you would check a box there. And then that's it. Questions. Those are the main docs I wanted to go over because those are what we think are the most important. What questions do you all have? Any questions? All right. Looks like Facebook, nothing. Well, that's all we have for today. I appreciate everybody being on. Thank you all. Hopefully this helps. Again, keep in mind July 23rd is the new date for the contract. So the 23rd, no longer Monday. We were planning on this Monday. That's not happening now. Bought a couple more weeks, July 23rd. August, middle of August is when the compensation, the payout to the agents in the MLS is coming out of the MLS. So if you have questions, you can always call me, drop it in the comments, email. We're always here to help. Appreciate you all being on. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for your questions. And we appreciate it all. We'll talk with you soon. Thank you so much.